Hello everybody, welcome back to the Mindy Raquant podcast. I'm your host, Mindy Raquant, and thank you so much for being here. I'm so thankful you've joined me today, and I don't really have much of a plan for this episode. I normally do structure them pretty heavily, and I just felt like I kind of needed to take a little breather from all the planning and preparation and just kind of go into this just almost more like just a processing episode. And what I mean by that is I tend to be very much of an internal processor. I love to write to process my thoughts, and I like to think in my head a lot, but that can sometimes backfire on me, and I just get so kind of bogged down in my thoughts that I forget to talk about what I'm thinking. And so I felt like God wanted me to just kind of walk through some of my thoughts recently and just to process some of the things that I have been thinking about and learn how to be a little bit more of an external processor. And it's kind of interesting because for all you wives out there, you might be able to relate to this depending on how your husband is, but my husband likes to talk about things that he's thinking about, which is wonderful. I love to hear what he's thinking about, and we like to have conversations together about that. But it's easy for me to just kind of listen to him and, affirm him and understand him, and then just forget to talk about what I'm thinking about. And it's easy for me to just be like, oh, yeah, that's great, I hear you, but not join in the conversation. And I'm learning how to be more aggressive with it and just talk about what I'm thinking about too. And just learning how to be more aggressive with processing externally. And I feel like after Mike and I had started dating, that was when I first started to learn how to really be more of an external processor, because I didn't really have anyone before that to process externally with, at least not very much. And so it was an interesting journey over the past couple of years, learning how to process externally instead of just going over and over in my head. And by the way, our wedding anniversary is coming up next weekend. It's July 5 right now. And our wedding anniversary is July 11. So we got married 7/11/2020. And so, yeah, that was an interesting time to get married. And we got married in a friend's backyard, and it was very hot. I don't remember the exact temperature, but it was in the 90s. And our wedding was planned for I'm going to say 5:30, I believe, in the evening, obviously, not in the morning. And so we actually ended up waiting until I don't remember, it's been so long now, but probably 6 or 6:30 before we started, because it was just so hot. And yeah, but anyway, we got married, and we did not even go on honeymoon because it was COVID and nothing was open. So we ended up mostly just staying home. And I remember one day we went to Old Sacramento and had a meal there and walked around for a while, but we did not have a honeymoon. And over the past couple of years, we have not been able to do much celebration beyond eating a cheap fast food meal and having a little celebration. We haven't really been able to afford anything beyond that. And so, yeah, one day we will be able to afford traveling somewhere exotic or doing something that's a bit more extensive in way of celebration. So I'm looking forward to that day, but it still is not here yet. We still will just be doing something simple, but really, marriage is such a great gift, and I'm just thankful that I get to spend every day with my best friend. But anyway, I guess I kind of got off on a little rabbit trail. And I wanted to mention there are a couple of things. One is that I have been really enjoying recently having guests on the podcast, and I believe there is the episode where I had Janya had her on the podcast, and that was such a powerful testimony, and it was so cool to hear what God's been doing in her life. And I just would like to invite you, if you feel like you have something that you would like to share, you can email me at mindyrequant@gmail.com, and I will take you through a process to see if you are a good fit for the podcast, and we could hopefully film an episode, and I will share it on here. So if you want to do that, go ahead and email me. And another thing is that I do have an email list where I just send out weekly encouragements, things that God has been showing me, and if you would like to get those emails, I will have that linked below. And another thing is that I have written 2 books. This one is my first one, and I wrote that, I'm gonna say 2 years ago. Yeah, I believe so. It was published 2023. Yeah, June 2023. So that's actually just a little bit more than 2 years ago, and it's just my story of emotional healing, and it was a blast to write this. And then this book was a bit harder to write, but it's just the story of how I overcame a lot of things in the early days of our marriage and found a bunch of healing and talking about sex too. So those are my 2 books. And I'm actually working on writing a novel right now. I have never really written stories, but I wanted to experiment with it and see how it would fit. And I feel like I have been having so much fun, and it's just been like pouring out. Like it's like these stories have always been there, and now I'm tapping into that part of my head and my heart, and it's just like coming out. Like when I go to write, I literally it just flows, and it's just so much fun. And I guess you could say I have a natural talent for writing, which I do, but I also feel like God has given me this talent and this gift to share with other people, and so that's what I'm trying to do, and I'm having so much fun in the process. But yeah, like I said, I guess I didn't really have a plan going into this episode very much, and I don't have any notes or anything, so I feel like I'm just kind of blabbing right now. I'm just kind of yapping, but it's kind of fun to have more of an unstructured episode and just kind of let it go where it goes. But I was actually thinking about talking about moving, because I have moved so many times in my life. I have moved, like, I'm not sure if this is the right number, but I think I've moved probably approximately 20 times in my life. And I am going to be 27 in September. And so, yeah, I have moved a lot in my life, and I was actually thinking about going through in my head all the different moves. So I was actually born in the Bahamas because my parents at that time of their lives, they were Eastern Mennonite, and their church had sent them to the Bahamas, where they had a missionary base, and so my dad was a mechanic, and he was going to work on their vehicles. I believe that's correct. And so I was born there, and so they moved from the Bahamas back to their hometown, which was British Columbia. Oh my goodness, I feel like I don't even remember the name of the town. Was it Burns Lake? I think it was. And it's like a super small town 12 hours north of Vancouver. And so they grew up way back in the boondocks. And so anyway, we moved from the Bahamas to Burns Lake, British Columbia, when I was a couple months old. I don't know exactly how old I was. And so I lived there up until I was like 3.5, 4, I think. And then we moved from British Columbia to Southern California, and that was when my parents left the Eastern Church. And it was a church that, in Southern California, it was a church that was still Mennonite, but it was a lot less conservative. And so, yeah, they moved there, and I was like 4. So we moved into one house that was in a town called Fraser Park, and we lived there for a while, and my parents were working on building a house. And so after that house was built, we moved into that house. And so I'm just going to count on my fingers because I don't think I can remember in my head. So from the Bahamas to British Columbia was one move. Then I don't remember if there was any moves in British Columbia, so I'm just gonna count that as one move. So then we moved from British Columbia to Southern California to that first house while my parents were building the bigger house. And then after that house was built and we moved in there, that was the third move. Then we moved from, hang on, there's a house I'm missing. We did move from a house from Fraser Park to a different house before we moved into the house my parents built. So that's going to add a move in there. So then from that house into the house my parents built was 4 moves. Then we moved from that house to Idaho. And the reason why we moved there was because that church that my parents had moved to in Southern California was having some issues and they wanted to leave for the sake of our family. So we moved there. So that would be 5 moves. And then my dad's job while we lived in Idaho was a little too far of a commute, and so they wanted to move closer to his job. So we moved just across the border into Oregon. So that would be 6 moves. Then we lived there for a little while, and the church that we were going to fell apart, and so my dad decided to move through some connections with friends and stuff to move to Iowa. So we moved there, move number 7, and then while we were living in Iowa, which is a total of like 2.5 years, I think, approximately, we moved to a different house while we lived in Iowa. So that would be move number 8. Then we moved from Iowa back to Southern California to the church that we had originally been a part of because they had had a split, and so now my dad felt more comfortable going to that church. So number 9, and I lived there for approximately 7 years, I think. So that's the longest I've ever lived in one place. Yeah, at that point I was like 13, I'm gonna say. I think it was 2012, early 2012. And so, yeah, we lived there for 7 years. And when I was 20, I was almost 21, I decided to move out of my parents' house, and I decided to move to Sacramento and go to a different type of church. And so that would be move number 10. So that was 10 moves. By the time I was almost 21, I lived with this family for a year. And at the end of that year, I got married. And so my husband and I moved in together. That would be move number 11. So we lived in one apartment for, I'm going to say we lived in that apartment for a year, I believe. And then I had gotten pregnant there, and I was probably about, I'm going to say 5 to 6 months pregnant. And so we moved into a different apartment that we liked better. So that would be move number 12. And we were planning on staying there. We were not planning on moving again. We were planning on staying there for as long as we wanted to. And then God did stuff, and we ended up moving to Arizona because Mike's sister's husband, Mike's brother-in-law, was hiring. He wanted to hire Mike to work for him, And so we ended up moving down there, and a house opened up for us. So we moved down there, and when we got there, the house that we were going to move into ended up being really not ideal. The landlord was not the best, and it was just not the best situation. So I guess I actually forgot how many moves that was. Yeah, that would be move number 13. So we moved into that house for a while, and then Mike's brother-in-law's uncle, I think I have that right. It was some kind of family connection who had a house that they were working on renovating, and so we decided to move into that house, and they finished renovating it within a few months, and so we moved in there. That would be move number 14. And so we moved in there. We lived in there for like a year and a half, approximately-ish. And it was a nice house, and we were planning once again on staying there for the foreseeable future. We were not planning on moving, but once again, there were things that were beyond our control. The job didn't end up working out. The economy was bad, and things just didn't work out. And so we ended up moving into a camper after, approximately a year and a half. In fact, I believe that July 4 weekend was the weekend that we bought the first camper. So that would be exactly 2 years ago that we moved into that first camper. So that would be move number 15. And so we moved into that first camper, and this is where things get crazy. So after moving into that first camper, Mike was still working the same job. It was just, he was working the same job, but he just got transferred to a different department. So he had been building sheds, but they moved him from building sheds to the sales department, and the sales lot was an hour away from where we currently were. And so what we did was we traded my husband's car for a truck camper because we had a truck. And so we decided to move from that first camper into the truck camper. So that would be move number 16. So we moved into that truck camper, and what we would do is we would go to that sales lot an hour away, and we would stay there for the week. And we slept in the truck camper, and then the sales office was so big that my son Liam and I could just hang out in the office while Mike was working, and it was so remote that we didn't get many customers, so it wasn't really that big of a deal. So that was what we did for the week, and then on the weekends we would actually go back to that first camper, and we would stay there for the weekend, and we would just do that. So we did that for a couple of months, and then it ended up being that Mike got transferred from that sales lot to a different sales lot, which happened to be close to where we were currently living. I know this is so confusing, I'm sorry. So it was closer to the first camper that we had been living in. And so we ended up moving out of the truck camper into the first camper. So that would be move number 17. So we moved back into that first camper, and we lived in there for a while again. But it was getting close to winter time, and that camper was not winterized. It was not really a good idea to live in there in the winter. It was just going to be cold and probably leaky for the rain, and so we decided to move. We were living on my brother-in-law's, Mike's brother's property. I mean, it wasn't his house, but we were living on the yard in the camper, and so there was a shed in the backyard that they said we could move into. So we actually moved into that little shed for the winter. So that would be move number 18. And so then we lived there for a while. And during that time, we really wanted to move away from that area back to Sacramento, which was where Mike and I had gotten married and had my son and stuff. And so we were looking to sell the truck camper so that we could afford to buy a nicer camper, because none of the campers we had were like able to be driven around except for the truck camper, and we didn't want to live in that because it was too little to really live in. And so we were looking to sell the truck camper, so we listed it on Facebook Marketplace. And then, okay, let me just remember, I was at number 18. I'm going to put my hands down. So, we listed it on Facebook Marketplace, and then this guy reached out to us, and he offered us a vehicle and some cash in exchange for the truck camper. And we were like, well, we don't want a vehicle. What we want is what do you call it? We wanted a specific type of camper, and I can't remember the name of the camper right now, but we wanted a specific type of camper. So Mike told the guy, like, well, we were looking for this specific type of camper. And so the guy, I literally thought he was like an angel from heaven, because he came up with this deal that was literally a godsend for us. So this guy on Facebook Marketplace found another guy who had a camper that was exactly what we were looking for. And so what happened was a 3-way swap happened. So we had this truck camper that we wanted to sell. So we sold the truck camper to this guy on Facebook Marketplace who had the vehicle and the cash. The guy with the vehicle and the cash gave the vehicle and the cash to this third guy who had the camper that we wanted, and then we got the camper. So it was like a 3-way swap. I hope that makes sense. So we moved into that camper, which would be move number 19, and it's the camper we are still currently living in. So we were living, as I said, on my brother-in-law's yard. So we moved then from his yard to where my parents live in Southern California, because we wanted to spend the winter there and to just spend time with them. So that would be move number 20. Even though it was still the same camper, it was still a move. So we lived there for a couple of months, and then in the spring we moved from Southern California to Sacramento, and we lived on a friend's yard for a few months until we found a more permanent spot. So I guess that would be move number 21. And then, we moved from there to the spot where we currently are. So that would be move number 22. And we have been here for the past almost year and a half. And so, we are looking to move into an apartment very soon. So we are really hoping and praying that we can stay in that place for the foreseeable future, because all those moves have really taken a toll on us, and we feel like we need to just settle and stop moving around. And we did not intentionally move all those times. We really needed to follow God's leading, and we also were just it kind of felt like when the children of Israel were in the wilderness and they were following the pillar of cloud and fire, the cloud by day and the fire by night. And it felt like that during that season where we were in the wilderness, quite literally actually, because Arizona is a desert. And so it kind of felt like a very literal representation of the season we were going through, of just following the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. And God led us through that season, and we are coming into a season where we are more settled. Like I said, for the past year and a half, we've been living in the same place, and after we're in an apartment, or whatever happens, whether God leads us into an apartment or not, we definitely want to stay settled. We don't want to move again. But I know that was a very long conversation about all the moves, but since I've moved so many times, I have had to deal with a lot of brokenness because of it, because like especially as a child, it really tore me around to move so many times and to constantly be losing friends. And I feel like that's something that I've just had to wrestle with a lot, even as an adult, because we've moved so many times in the last couple of years. It's just really been something that I've been grappling with. And especially, there's a specific thing that when you live somewhere that you really love, and then you move away, and then you come back, there is something in that is just really difficult. And like when I was a kid, we lived in Southern California, which I loved. I really loved living there. It was my home. And then when we left and we came back, I had gone from an 8-year-old kid, or maybe I was more like 10. I think, yeah, I was like 10. I had gone from a 10-year-old kid to a teenager. I think I was 13 when we moved back. And so I had changed, and I didn't know what to do with the change, and other people had changed, and the circumstances were different, and it felt like the same thing as an adult. Like, I lived in Sacramento and I loved it here, and we had friends and it was great. And then we moved away, and I went from being I grew up, I changed, I went through a lot when we lived in Arizona, and I left Sacramento with a new baby, and we came back with a toddler, and our marriage had gone through a lot, and I just wasn't the same person anymore. And the area here, the people here in Sacramento weren't the same people anymore. They had gone through a lot, and the church that we went to is it's the same church, but the people, it feels different because they went through a lot, and I feel like I've just been grappling with who I am now. Like, now that we've moved away and we came back, who am I now? What does God want from me now? What is my life supposed to look like now? Where do I belong? Where do I fit in? And just trying to process all of that. And I must say that I don't feel like I have answers. I don't feel like I have a grand thing to say about it. I just wanted to talk about this because I feel like people don't really talk about moving a whole lot, because moving really is traumatic, and it can really do a lot of damage if we don't know how to manage it correctly. And I feel like for me, the thing that really tore me apart is the feeling of losing stuff. Like, moving and having to reorganize your whole life and get used to a new location and new friends. It just makes me feel like I'm afraid of losing, and so I tend to freak out and panic. And there have been times that Mike suggests reorganizing things in the camper, and I would get this look on my face that he learned to recognize, of just like, I literally could not even handle moving things around in the camper, because it just made me feel like I was going to lose everything again. And I do feel like I've been able to heal more now, and I feel like I've been able to get to the point now where I'm able to reorganize again. But for a while there, I was not even okay with reorganizing stuff. And I guess like it just feels like I'm still in the thick of just trying to figure out my way and trying to figure out where I belong and what is my life supposed to look like. And I feel like I'm still kind of grieving through the past 20 years of my life. I feel like I'm still just trying to figure out who I am, and also not finding my identity in where I am, because I feel like that's something that if you find your identity in where you are, like physically where you live, you're going to be a lot more prone to being broken, I think, when you have to move away from that, because you're going to just be totally uprooted. And there's been an element where God has had to teach me that I am safe and that I am protected and grounded in Him, and that even if I never am living in a certain space for more than a certain amount of time, that's not where my identity comes from. And so as long as I'm in Him, I'm going to be okay. I kind of feel a little silly because I don't have a huge, wonderful answer to the things I'm talking about. I'm just literally trying to process them out loud and trying to articulate how it feels. And I think that one of the things I have not processed yet is community. And I've obviously lost a lot of friends because of all the moves, and I feel like I have not been able to make new friends yet. And that's something that I think is going to happen. I think that's something that God is going to do for me, but it hasn't happened yet. And I think for a while I was kind of panicking because I hadn't really enlarged my community very much. And I was freaking out about that, and I was like stressing about it. And I feel like that's one thing that God has been showing me, is that it's okay if I don't enlarge my community all at once right away. Like, I have a lot of healing to do. I have a lot that God has given me to do. And if I'm not immediately seeing growth in a certain area, it's okay. And I'm doing the best that I can. And if making a lot of new friends is too much for me right now, that's okay, and I don't have to stress about it. And at the right time, God is going to bring the right people into my life, and I will make those friends. But at this point, I still feel like God is like, it's okay if you don't go there right now. And it's okay for you to just sort of take a pause and breathe and just learn who you are. Like, just spend time with me. Just be my daughter and just enjoy my presence. And out of that place, you'll get the healing you need, and you'll get the stability you need, and you'll go where you need to go. And the right people will come in when you're ready. And I do feel like the friends/community thing is something that I have always grappled with, because I had a best friend as a child who, when we moved away from Southern California when I was 10, we lost that friendship. And we wrote letters for a long time, but our friendship eventually fizzled out because they had left that church, and at that point I couldn't be friends with somebody who wasn't a part of our church, and so I lost that friendship, and that crushed me so much that it took me probably a good 10 years before I was able to even think about making a new friend. And that's something that I have still just been like grappling with and wrestling with, and trying to figure out like what do I even want? Like, I think the biggest thing we all want with friends is to connect. And I have spent so much of my life feeling disconnected from people that it almost feels more normal. But that's not how we were created. We were created to live in community and to have friends and to be in connection with other people. And the friends I do have, I love them so much. And I do love the friends I have, but I want to have more friends. I want to have more people in my life. But I guess forgive me if this is sounding a little confusing, because this is literally me just talking my thoughts. Once again, I felt like God was just like, it's okay if you don't go out and make a ton of friends right now. It's okay for you to just kind of take a minute to breathe and to heal, and then friends are coming. Community is coming, and I feel like that's not just for me, but that's for you too. That's for other people listening to this. There are communities that are coming together that God is building, and I think that there are communities that God is building that nothing can tear apart, because I think a lot of us have gone through this process of losing friends, of growing out of a circle of friends, of moving away, of losing certain people because maybe you made a different choice or whatever it may be. And I think God is building communities where they won't be lost, they won't be torn apart, and they won't be broken because of a move or because of a different choice. They're going to be solidly grounded in His Word and rooted in a different foundation where they won't just be torn apart, and they'll be like true family, even though they're not blood family. And so that's what I feel like God has been doing, and it's coming. There's hope on the horizon, there's healing, and God is starting it in me, and He's starting it in you, and it's going to create a flood, and going to flood the whole nation of America, and it's going to go to the whole world. Yeah, I guess that's kind of all that I had on my heart to share, and maybe I will continue some more of these unstructured episodes just to try to process things, and so you guys can get to know me, because all the moves that I've had have been such a huge part of my life, and yet I just don't really talk about it too much. And so, yeah, if you have a story to share, just comment below or email me to share it on the podcast if that is a good fit. And I would love to get to know you guys too and have you be a part of my online community. So just let me know what you guys have to say about this episode, and I will see you guys on another episode. Bye.